we cut a lot of rubbish out, and we got straight to the nub.
Because it was, wasn't it? It was, as Dave said. We had about 15. We went from one sentence to about 15.
2008,
pages.
they were a whisper in the wind. They were just a recommended.
To be fair.
Then over the next few years, we got all these graphs of the
Charts.
UK and the lightning strokes and the calculations, and
nobody
did it.
Now it's gone. So we've gone 15 pages, been taken out of the regs. So surely then, if all them regulations have gone, we don't have to fit them.
Actually, it's more like the other way around.
Hello and welcome. You join us for another CEF Tech Talking podcast. You've got Dave and myself, Darren, and this week we have got
the king of the SPDs, Mr. Robin.
Very kind indeed. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you very much for coming all this way. We appreciate you, because you're down on the south coast, aren't you?
Yep.
And we're nowhere near the south coast. We're currently today we're in Biggleswade. So Biggleswade is our main distribution centre, and you've come and joined us here so we can get set up. And we appreciate the drive wasn't easy, so thank you very much for doing that. That was brilliant. Whilst we're here with you, we've got some questions.
Okay.
Yeah. We really want to. Well, let's take a look at SPDs to start with, because the regs have sort of seemed to have dismissed SPDs. Now, we don't need them, do we? Because we've chopped down from 17 pages to just a couple of small paragraphs. So
I think the reality is we cut a lot of rubbish out, and we got straight to the nub.
Because it was, wasn't it? It was, as Dave said. We had about 15. We went from one sentence to about 15.
2008,
pages.
they were a whisper in the wind. They were just a recommended.
To be fair.
Then over the next few years, we got all these graphs of the
Charts.
UK and the lightning strokes and the calculations, and
nobody
did it.
Now it's gone. So we've gone 15 pages, been taken out of the regs. So surely then, if all them regulations have gone, we don't have to fit them.
Actually, it's more like the other way around. As I say, we cut out the map, the calculation, which nobody did, and we cut out all of that stuff because I think generally the feedback wasn't that great.
Yeah. That's a fair comment.
And we just said, well, okay, how can we do this? And it was really one of the main sort of membership organisations, if I can put it like that said, we need something far simpler. And we said, well, okay, what have you got? So we just had 3 tick boxes, and if you tick one of those, and this is always going to be for properties without lightning protection, because if you have lightning protection, it's a given.
Yeah, you've got to do it anyway, haven't you?
Yeah. So it really captured all of the safety services, whether there was a threat to human life, or whether there's data or financial loss.
Yeah.
If you tick any of those boxes, you've hit the SPD.
Yes.
And then there was a caveat about it, really a conversation, I guess, with the
whether
homeowner.
it's tolerable to accept the data loss. Whatever.
Yeah, that tolerable risk was always mentioned as well, wasn't there?
So accepting that we are fitting them then, by and large, that's the recommendation.
It is.
It's a shall in some instances.
Yeah.
One of the things that got discussed a lot when we were with the guys doing the last series of tech talks was this business of how you would coordinate devices. And let's turn to domestic to start off with, right? So what is an SPD doing, and why do we have to coordinate them? Why is there a drop-off of, say, 10, 15 metres to the next device? Talk us through.
So if you have an SPD in your consumer unit, that's going to take care of anything coming in through the origin.
Yes. Yep.
And it's going to have a set of performance values, which is probably unique to each manufacturer.
Get that.
So if you have one at the origin and the place is sufficiently big, i.e. that the cable runs are quite long, you've got lots of sensitive equipment, LED drivers everywhere, lots of
computers, mobile
phones, the whole sort of 9 yards. You may need some more.
Yeah.
Now that could be that some are just plugged into a trailing socket, which has got built-in surge protections.
Yeah, you see a lot of them, don't you?
Telly.
Yeah. So that's the Type 3, isn't it?
Yes.
So we've gone from the Type 2 that would be at the origin of this domestic dwelling to offering local protection with a trailing lead, and it's the coordination of devices that will truly, fully protect my mobile phone or my driver or whatever, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've been using the word attenuator Because that's effectively what they do. They attenuate the surge, but it can build up again, can't it?
It can. So if you have like a very good installation at the origin, and I appreciate I'm using a lot of arm movement, which for radio is not good.
But you can watch us on YouTube. It's a great. Thank you for that.
Go to YouTube.
Yes. So even if you have an SPD at the origin, after 10 meters, the residual voltage, because you don't get 240 volts out, you get, say, I don't know, a couple of kV.
Yeah.
That's fine, because the reg says I can get away with 2.5 kV.
Yep.
But after 10 meters, the reg says, this is in section 534, it doubles. So my 2 kV now goes up to 4 kV, which my system cannot tolerate. So I have to slap it down again.
Yep.
And that means it's either the Type 3, which I've plugged in my computer into, and my printer and all the rest of it, or if I've got sufficiently large loads, I may have another Type 2.
Which, again, if I've got, so my dwelling, I've got a consumer unit at the origin. I've also got a consumer unit that's right down the bottom of the garden, which is in the garage and my home office.
Right.
So I haven't got SPDs down there, though.
No, not.
So this is where that problem that you've just said would occur. If the problem occurred down the bottom there, I'd have no protection from coming back into the installation.
So we're not talking overhead, we're talking underground. Underground's equally vulnerable.
Exactly. I mean, it's the same risk assessment, because you've got a cable underground coming into the property for the power coming in, and then you've got a current going down to this summer house or workshop down the bottom of your garden. So the risk assessment is that if there was a nearby lightning strike, looking at the worst case scenario, it would be the same rise of ground potential, the same induced current, so you need an SPD at that other location. Also, you may need a third, because that cable's coming back into your main property.
This is the bit I was going to come on to, because I know that as we look at BS 7671, and you do have to really read all of the section, because you need to understand, as you said in 534, you need to look at those zonal concepts that we need to apply. Now, quickly, could you explain what zonal concepts are?
Absolutely. Now, you do have that little round sort of diagram in the book, but basically zone 0 is outside. That's where lightning is. That's the most dangerous zone.
Got ya.
So for the purposes of a dwelling, we could say that zone 1 is the inside volume of the house.
Yep.
And in your case, you have another zone 1, which is the other outbuilding.
Cool.
So in 534.4.1.2, it says that if a cable crosses a zonal interface from the outside in, you fit the SPD.
At that point, don't you?
Yes.
Right, so this is the bit, Dave.
Okay,
we'd have to fit it. So where my cable goes out from the upstairs ring final circuit, it goes out to supply the garage.
You'd have to put one there.
There, because it needs one for that. But also, I should be putting one where that cable comes back into the main house, because that's the point where, if there's a problem, I need to stop it going between zone 0 into zone 1.
Zone 1.
Yeah.
So how many zones can we get then?
In a house, probably 2.
Outside and inside.
If it was a big dwelling then, and you fitted a second Type 2, let's say, would that become another zone?
Well, the zone is actually defined as being screened. So when we talk about the volume of the building, what we're saying is that a brick and tile property isn't really a zone, but your consumer unit's metal, and that is screened, and it is a zone.
Right.
Oh, I see.
Now, you might get people saying, oh, yeah, but my old consumer unit's plastic. Well, that's great, but the same methodology applies.
I got you.
Because you don't want surges coming from outside, whether it's down the DNO supply or through a natural event coming into your property. So you approach it in exactly the same way.
So somebody who's looking at a larger property, I'm thinking about my place. It's over 3 floors. I've got my studios on the top floor.
Here we go.
I've not been to some of them, of course, because that's where the staff live. But I understand they're up there somewhere.
Yes.
Somebody's got to make breakfast. But I often wonder whether I should have an SPD right up at the top, because it must be a good 30 metres of cable between the consumer unit working its way through the floors, up the joists, up the walls. Do I need another Type 2 up there?
Well, if your studio is full of some nice mixing desks and all the rest of it, it's going to cost a lot of money, but the SPD won't. Yeah. But if you have it up there, you're providing a path from the phase conductors to Earth if something happens. Right. And without it, you don't have that path, which happens when there's a rise. Because An SPD is basically sitting there doing, to be honest, not a great deal.
It's a static device.
Until
something happens.
Turns on in a high voltage event. And then it turns off, and then we go on to the next one, and so on and so on. And the important thing is that SPDs are not a one-shot device.
Yeah. So, this zonal concept, we discussed it domestically, but if we take it to, for instance, this large building that
we're sitting in a massive building.
Yes.
This must have multiple zones, I'd imagine.
Zone 0 is still outside.
Yep.
This building has lightning protection.
Yes.
So the entire volume of this huge metal box is Zone 1, and all of your distribution boards and control panels are Zone 2 within Zone 1. So automatically, every distribution board is now a multiple of however many there are.
Right, so I've got this to ask you, because I know some of the panels downstairs that we've got. You're talking about putting type 1 or type 2 on these panels,
Yes.
on the electrical installation.
Yes.
But downstairs, because this is the main distribution hub, relies on a lot of connection to the internet and to the outside world, all the phone lines that are coming into this place, surely they are a route from Zone 0 to Zone 1 as well.
They are if the cable's copper.
Right, so at the minute, I believe it could be fibre.
Okay.
So at fibre, we're safe. But that if they were old existing copper from BT Exchange to here,
Yes.
it's all still comes with the BT Exchange, is it? Your provider might change, but that will be them providing the link.
Yeah.
Is there anything we can put on there? Because surely, if I just leave that back door open, I've just spent all this money on SPDs, but it's a waste if I haven't shut the back door.
Absolutely.
We've both been to the factory at Dehn in Germany. I mean, it's absolutely bristling with SPDs, isn't it? Every single circuit.
It is. It's
Well,
probably one of the...
not only every single circuit, but every single phone line in,
Yes.
and everything that breaches, as you said earlier on, that 0 to 1 or into 2 or into 3. Every time you break those zonal concept, they're installing SPDs.
So now, is that because you're setting up an ultimate model for visitors like us to see, or is that really the way it should be in a factory?
It's the way it should be, and they do position it really for the purposes of display. It's like there are sections in the floor where you see the foundation earth.
Yeah,
all of their distribution boards and control panels have a clear front, or you can see an image of what's behind it.
Yeah.
So you can see what's going on. And even all of the network, the cabling, Cat 5, Cat 6, all the rest of it, wherever that goes from one building to the other, it's copper. So to keep that factory working, we need to have that Ethernet network operating.
Like us.
So, if lightning hits this massive tin shed,
Yeah.
and, someone's bolted a control panel for the conveyor system to a steel upright, and
they
lightning
do.
hits the roof, the lightning current takes the easiest path, and that could be down that upright,
Oh, it would, yeah.
which the control panel is bolted onto, and that's the end of your conveyor system. And I've seen it in similar places where they've been taken offline, had to import loads of temporary labour to start throwing boxes around, which is not the best image.
Can you imagine that out there?
It would cause a bit of a fuss, wouldn't it?
This is for online. We're at Biggleswade online. How many boxes do you reckon are there? And if it was completely manhandled, it would, as you quite rightly said, be a fortune.
Yes.
So, I mean, a lot of this stuff, when you're talking to clients, it's not a hard sell, I'd say, because you would propose that, wouldn't you? You'd say to them, look, this is the risk. You can have this, and I'm putting this in compliance with regulations. If you're saying, I don't want to go to the expense of doing that, so, again, you want to then move away from SPDs, just talk to them about the ultimate risk.
Absolutely.
It's the same as selling insurance, though, isn't it? And you are selling the possibility that things might go wrong in the future.
Absolutely. And it's more of a permanent insurance because the lifespan is years. They're going to keep going and going and going. And it's not like you have to have an annual premium. Once you've fitted it, that's it. That's
Yeah, because they are perishable devices, but they've got more than one life strike, haven't they?
In this country, as an example, I had a phone call from one of the stock exchanges, don't quite know which one, but it was in London, a financial institution. They said, this Dane SPD's failed. Oh, dear. Oh, okay. Well, it happens. They gave me the part number. I couldn't find it anywhere. It was like 30 years old. So, people don't want to think that these things are going to pop like fuses or light bulbs and you have to replace them frequently. It's just not like that.
No. And I mean, so this is one of the things that I've noticed with SPDs, right? So we get an SPD and the standard quite rightly suggests that there needs to be an indicator on there.
Mm-hmm.
So the indicator tells us whether these devices are good to go or whether they need replacing. So we take that quite good safety device and we stick it in a box and put a lid on it.
Yeah, we do. Yes, we do that.
Why do we do that?
Well, there is the option for a volt-free contact, so you can monitor them remotely, which I think is a very good idea because, let's imagine you have one in your house, you have the SPD fitted, and this summer we've had lots of storms.
Yes.
And a colleague said to me the other day that every degree of global warming that we have is a 12% increase of lightning.
Oh.
Wow.
Brilliant, isn't it?
Oh, it's for you.
Oh,
You must have loved that one.
oh, we do. So if we have 2 degrees, we've just jumped up by a quarter, which is fantastic news.
And the thing that I suppose a lot of people don't realise, you don't know this is happening. And what we're talking about lightning, but they do protect against other man-made surges, natural surges. don't they?
Absolutely.
This is the big thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
The majority of overvoltage events that we see in the UK are man-made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Type 2s that we're installing isn't necessarily going to protect from a lightning strike that happens down the road, although it will do that. But more if we see the network, and we know that the network is breaking down, a break in a neutral will create a spike, and that can damage your power supply to your laptop, your computer, your iPhone, anything like that. The Type 2 device would protect against that type of event, wouldn't it?
That's what it's there for. And fitting an SPD isn't like an umbrella over your house to stop lightning hitting it. They've got to make that clear. It's not anything to do with lightning protection at all.
Yeah.
If lightning wants to hit your house and burn it down, it's going to. And, we talked about, in your garden where you've got that long cable going down, and the regs do say if a cable crosses a zonal interface, but I wouldn't put an SPD on my porch light. If lightning wants to hit my porch light, then it can. The SPD's not going to help me.
That's the least of your worries, isn't
Exactly,
it, really?
yes.
Now, one thing I do want to just quickly touch upon is there's lots of manufacturers out there. I know you can't talk about other manufacturers apart from yourself, but just want to get my head around this idea. So some manufacturers are suggesting that if they're installing these in consumer units or distribution boards, they need to give it a separate overcurrent protective device. So they're going from an overcurrent protective device into their SPD. Now, some are, some aren't. Is this, can you get SPDs that have either integral overcurrent protective devices, or can you get SPDs out there that don't need that additional protection?
Yes, and we do them because we recognise that the overcurrent protection takes up room, it's additional cost, etc. So we do have Type 1s and Type 2s which don't need any fusing at all. It's all built in. The fusing is there just in case when the SPD reaches the end of its life, it wants to fail as a short circuit. Let's be clear, that's not its behaviour mode. Behaviour mode is to basically blow up, which would be an open circuit.
Yeah.
But you have to allow for these sorts of things, especially if you have a particularly large event and it thinks, okay, I'm going to fail as a short. Don't want that. Also, you need discrimination over your service head. Now, for our Type 2 devices, they're rated 125 amps, so you don't need to have that additional overcurrent protection anyway, but we fit a breaker into the consumer unit because it's the easy way to break out the consumer unit to go to an SPD.
Yeah, because for future, when you're going into installations and you're going to start doing EICRs, you need to isolate the SPD to carry out your testing.
Yes.
If you haven't got that, then it's hard to do. But again, the configuration of many consumers that are out there can have it one side of the main switch or the other side, and you can, if you've got the ones that can pop out, the sellers that can pop out,
they're very good
use
on
those as well.
The pluggable ones.
Yeah, so you can do those as well. So there's lots of solutions are out there, but that really does confirm to me what I thought about the need or the not need for some of these. It's down to you as the installers and you as the designers to find the one that does or doesn't require the overcurrent protective device.
And each manufacturer has its own set of instructions, of course, but what you can't do is you can't feed a Type 1, which is rated at 12,500 amps of lightning current, or 25 kA in some cases. You can't feed that with a 6 kA domestic breaker.
No.
But people do. and we've seen images, because you've been on gigs with me, where a consumer unit is destroyed, and that is the sort of lightning level, and the MCBs never survive.
No, they won't.
So you can't have an MCB feed in the thing which is supposed to be doing the protection. So it doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, horse and cart.
Self-disconnecting, really. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Robin, we could probably talk for hours
always,
upon
yes.
this. However, that's the end of this podcast.
Is it?
Yes, so thank you very much for this. Was it painless?
It was.
There you go. We told you it'd be
Yes.
nice to you, didn't we?
The Valium worked well. Yes.
And as usual, when I sit down with you, I've learned something.
Which is absolutely great. Now, for those you listening to this CEO Tech Talk podcast, we'd like to say, look, if you enjoyed it, subscribe, share, and like, and let everyone else feel the love as well. Because there's a lot of love in the room today, isn't there?
I'm loved up, mate.
Right, from me, Dave, and Robin, thank you very much for listening to this CF Tech Talking podcast.